She lived in my living room for free for 5 months and had the nerve to say I was jealous of her. She looked me dead in the face, or well, sent me a voice note that said she would do some numbers and might possibly be able to help with rent. 5 months in. 5 months of sleeping on a couch bed that takes up the entire living room, leaving her stuff scattered everywhere, disappearing for weeks at a time, paying absolutely nothing, and the best she could offer was that she might possibly be able to help. Let that sink in for a second. And while I was still processing the disrespect of that message, she had the nerve to tell me about her sugar daddy and follow it up with the comment that she knows it must be hard to be jealous of people who are doing well. To me. In my own home. That she was living in for free. Let me take you back to January, because this situation did not start bad. I want to be fair here. When I first moved in, I was told everything up front. My roommate had her friend staying in the living room. She was getting back on her feet financially, she was going to help with rent, she was going to chip in with cooking and cleaning. That sounded reasonable to me. People go through hard times and sometimes they need a little grace period. I understood that. I have been in tight spots myself and I know what it feels like to need someone to extend a little patience while you get yourself sorted. I moved in with that understanding and I genuinely did not have a problem with it at first. The arrangement felt like something adults could manage between themselves if everyone was operating in good faith. But January turned into February. February turned into March. March turned into April. And now here we are approaching the end of May, and not a single dollar has come from this woman toward rent. Not one. She has a car. She has an office job. She works full-time. This is not a situation where someone is down on their luck and scraping to survive. This is a person who made a choice, month after month, to simply not pay for the space she was occupying. And the thing that gets me the most is that she was not even hiding it or pretending it was temporary anymore. She just lived there, freely and comfortably, as though the arrangement had quietly become permanent somewhere along the way without anyone agreeing to that. And for 5 months, that choice was allowed to stand. The living room situation alone would have driven most people to their breaking point before month 2. Her couch bed thing literally consumed the entire living room. Not a corner of it. Not part of it. The whole thing. You walked through the front door and the first thing you saw was her. Her bedding, her bags, her shoes, her chargers, all of it spread out like she had claimed the space and dared anyone to say something about it. There was no shared living room anymore. There was just her room, which happened to also be the hallway between the front door and the rest of the apartment. And when she was home, she was loud. I mean genuinely, startlingly loud, late at night, the kind of loud that makes you wonder if you accidentally moved in next to a speaker system. The kind of loud that crawls under your bedroom door and sits on your chest when all you want to do is rest after a long shift. And when she was not home, which happened often because she apparently leaves for weeks at a time, her stuff was still there. All of it. Just sitting in the living room, taking up space, serving as a daily reminder that someone was getting a free ride and nobody was doing anything about it. I want to talk about the gossip too, because I think it matters. This was not just a person who was quiet and kept to herself and happened to not be paying rent. She was actively unpleasant to live around. Nasty gossip, consistently. The kind of sharp, mean commentary about people that poisons the atmosphere in a home and makes you feel like you need to watch what you say around her because anything could and probably would get repeated. The kind of person who brings a certain kind of negative energy into a space that makes you dread coming home. That is a lot to carry inside a home that is supposed to feel like your refuge. And while I could have tolerated any one of these things on its own, the combination of all of them stacked on top of a complete refusal to contribute financially was just too much. I brought it up to my roommate first. That was the right move and I want to give myself credit for trying to handle it internally before escalating. I sat her down and I was direct. I told her I wanted her friend to start paying rent and that I felt the situation had become genuinely unfair. I tried to frame it as calmly as I could because I did not want to blow the whole thing up before it had a chance to be resolved quietly. My roommate's response was essentially that she would ask her again and try. Not that she would enforce anything. Not that she would give her a deadline. Not that she would make clear there would be actual consequences if nothing changed. Just that she would try. Which, in my experience of watching this play out for 5 months, meant absolutely nothing was going to change. So then the woman herself messaged me. And here is where I have to pause for a moment, because the content of that voice note was genuinely something else. She told me she lives on and off with her parents and that they were fighting. She said she would do some numbers. She said she could possibly help with rent and would be happy to help. I remember sitting there listening to it and having to replay it because I was certain I had missed the part where she said something concrete. I had not. None of that is a commitment. None of that is a plan. None of that is what was agreed upon when I moved in. Happy to help is what you say when someone asks you to hold a door open. It is not an appropriate response to being asked to pay for the roof over your head. I responded clearly. I told her I did not want her living there unless she was paying rent, as was originally agreed. I said the same thing to my roommate. And their collective response was to start panicking about the landlord getting involved, telling me that we would all get kicked out, as if I was the one creating the problem here. The audacity of that reaction is genuinely impressive. The problem existed long before I decided to address it. I just happened to be the only person willing to say it out loud. Here is what I think was really going on beneath all of this. My roommate is, by her own nature, an incredibly kind and lenient person. And I do not say that as an insult. She clearly cares about the people in her life and she would rather absorb discomfort herself than be the source of it for someone else. But there is a version of kindness that enables people and protects them from the natural consequences of their choices, and that version of kindness is not actually good for anyone. My roommate did not want to confront her friend. She did not want to be the one to say that 5 months of free living was enough. She probably told herself there was a version of this that worked out peacefully on its own, that her friend would eventually come around, that pushing too hard would damage the friendship. So the tension just sat there, growing, until I was the one who had to push back on it. And the moment I did, I became the villain of the story in their eyes, even though I was the only one in the apartment who had been honest about what was actually happening. And let me be clear about something. I did not create this agreement. I was not the one who told this woman she could stay in the living room in exchange for contributing to rent and helping around the apartment. That deal was made before I arrived. I walked into a situation that was already in place and I accepted it because it seemed fair and manageable on paper. But somehow I was the one chasing down answers, asking for updates, getting vague responses, and eventually being the person who had to take it seriously. That is not my job. That should never have been my job. What finally pushed me over the edge was not just the months of unpaid rent. It was that comment about her sugar daddy and how she knew it must be hard to be jealous of people doing well. She said that to me. Knowing I work a minimum wage job. Knowing I have been struggling financially and that every dollar counts in a way that is not abstract or theoretical but genuinely felt at the end of every single month. And she said it from a couch in my living room that she was not paying a single dollar to sleep on. I want you to really picture that moment. She was comfortable enough in that space, comfortable enough in her complete lack of contribution, that she felt entitled to look at me and imply that my frustration was just envy dressed up as principle. I do not think I need to explain why that was the moment something shifted for me permanently. That comment was not accidental. It was deliberate. And it told me everything I needed to know about how this person actually views me and the situation she is in. So I went to the landlord. My landlord is kind and reasonable, and I knew going in that she was not going to throw everyone out over this. I explained the situation honestly. I said there was someone living in the apartment who was not on the lease and had not been paying rent. I kept the details clear and I did not exaggerate anything because I did not need to. The facts were enough on their own. My expectation was exactly what happened, that the landlord would want to formalize things properly, either adding her to the lease or having some kind of documented agreement. That is not revenge. That is just how things should have been structured from the beginning. The reaction from my roommate and her friend was immediate and over the top. They texted me saying we were all going to get kicked out, which I knew was not true, and which I explained to them directly. But I also told them something else that I think was important. I told them that the reason I was involving the landlord was specifically because their words had stopped meaning anything to me. They had promised payment at the end of the month more times than I could count. I needed someone with actual authority to enforce the agreement, because clearly the agreement meant nothing when it was just between us. Even after all of that, even after I went to the landlord, they sent me new promises. She will pay. It is handled. Everything is fine now. But here is the thing about promises that only appear after consequences have been introduced. They do not reflect a change in behavior. They reflect a change in pressure. The person making them is not suddenly moved by fairness or accountability. They are moved by the sudden reality that ignoring the situation is no longer a comfortable option. And the moment that pressure goes away, the behavior tends to go right back to what it was. I have lived this for 5 months. I know exactly how this story ends if there is no structure holding it in place. My roommate also told me she might look for a new place to live. And I sat with that for a moment, because I did not want to be dismissive of how much that stings when someone you live with and generally get along with says that to you. It is not a small thing to hear. It carries weight even when you know you were in the right. But I also had to be honest with myself. She was not threatening to leave because I had done something wrong. She was threatening to leave because I had done something that created consequences for her friend, and she was choosing her friend over a fair living situation. That is her right. But it does not make me the bad person in this story. Now let me tell you where I actually land on this whole thing, because I have been building to it and I want to be direct. No, you are not the one in the wrong here. Not even a little bit. You moved into a situation with a clear set of expectations. Those expectations were not met for 5 full months. You raised the issue through the appropriate channels, first by speaking to your roommate directly. And when that produced nothing, you escalated to the landlord in the most reasonable way possible. You did not blow the whole thing up. You brought in the person who actually has the authority to enforce agreements, which is exactly what should have happened months ago. The narrative that you somehow betrayed anyone by going to the landlord is completely backwards. The person who was actually betrayed here was you. Every single month that rent went unpaid. Every week that living room sat taken over by someone who contributed nothing. Every conversation where you asked for a straight answer and got a runaround. You were patient far longer than most people would have been. And when you finally acted, you acted reasonably. What really gets me is the comment about being jealous. I keep coming back to it. Because that comment reveals something important about how this person sees herself and sees you. She was not embarrassed. She was not apologetic. She was performing superiority, from a rent-free couch, in your living room, to your face. The audacity of that is almost artistic. And if anyone in this situation needed a reality check, it was her. The fact that the reality check came through a landlord rather than a friend or a mirror is not your problem. You are not the child here. You are the only adult in the building. My stepdad paid for my college and now needs my kidney, but I said no and my family lost their minds. He sat in a hospital waiting for a transplant, and his family was already texting me their thanks before I had made any decision at all. I had not said yes. I had asked for a few days of privacy to think through a major medical procedure. That was it. And somehow that was already being treated as a done deal. I need you to understand what was actually being asked here before you form any opinion. A kidney donation is not a small favor. It is not the kind of thing you decide over a weekend because people are expecting you to. The surgery involves real risks. The recovery is serious. You spend the rest of your life with one kidney, which means any future kidney problems you develop become significantly more dangerous. This is a permanent alteration to your body. And every single person in this man's family who was texting to say thank you already was not compatible. They were all off the hook. He was the only one holding the pressure. My stepdad came into my life during high school. And by every account, he is a good man. He married my mom, and from the beginning he stepped up. He told me he would take care of my college tuition and my living costs, and he followed through on that. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of promise a lot of people make and quietly walk back, and he did not. I want to acknowledge that clearly because I think it matters for understanding why this situation is so genuinely complicated and why dismissing it from either direction would be wrong. He showed up consistently. He did not make a performance of it. He just did what he said he would do year after year, and that kind of quiet reliability is something I genuinely respected about him. Which is exactly what makes this so hard. Because when you care about someone, when you feel real gratitude toward them, being put in a position where that gratitude is being weaponized against you is a specific kind of pain that is very difficult to describe. But here is where the story took a turn that I think a lot of people are not talking about enough. He told his mom the results and specifically asked her to keep it quiet for a few days. Just a few days. Not forever. Not to hide it permanently. Just a small window of time to breathe and think and process the weight of what he had just found out. Think about what that moment must have felt like. You have just learned that your body holds the key to whether someone you know lives or dies, and you are sitting with that information in a way that has not fully settled yet. You are not refusing. You are not running. You are simply asking for the basic dignity of being allowed to think before being asked to commit. That was not an unreasonable request. That was a human being asking for space before being pulled into one of the most significant decisions of his life. She told everyone the next day. Let me just sit on that for a second. The very next day. And not only did she tell everyone, but the family was already texting their thanks. Their thanks. For something he had not agreed to. For a decision that was not finalized. For a sacrifice that no one had any right to assume was coming. Picture what it feels like to pick up your phone and see message after message of gratitude pouring in for something you never promised. Each notification is another brick in a wall being built around you. Each thank you is another person who now believes a story about what kind of person you are, a story that requires you to hand over a piece of yourself to stay true to it. That level of boundary violation is not a small thing. It set the entire emotional tone for everything that came after. And it meant that when he said no, he was not just declining a medical procedure. He was pushing back against an enormous wave of expectation and gratitude that had been built without his consent. So he said he would not do it. And his stepdad, to his enormous credit, responded with grace. He said he understood. Imagine the restraint that takes. This is a man whose life is on the line, who just heard the word no from the one person who could have said yes, and his first instinct was to offer understanding instead of guilt. That response alone tells you something important about the kind of man his stepdad actually is. He did not guilt him. He did not bring up the college fund. He did not make it about what he had done or what was owed. He responded like a person who genuinely understood that this decision belongs to one person and one person only. I have a lot of respect for that. The rest of the family, however, was a completely different story. They called him names. They told him that without his stepdad they would have been out on the streets. They made it very clear that in their eyes, the college tuition had now become a debt with a very specific repayment method attached to it. And that framing is where I start to have serious problems with how this family handled the situation. Because there is a difference, a significant one, between being grateful for what someone did for you and believing that gratitude requires you to give them a piece of your body on demand. Generosity that comes with a hidden invoice attached to it is not really generosity. It is a loan that the borrower was never told about. And presenting that invoice at the exact moment when someone is already overwhelmed, already scared, already trying to think clearly about a life-altering surgery, is one of the most unfair things you can do to another person. The pressure was also uniquely and entirely placed on him because he was the only compatible person. Every other family member was incompatible and therefore not being asked to do anything. They were watching from the sideline, safe from the question, and using that safety to pile expectations onto the one person who did not have that luxury. That is a position that is almost impossible to fully explain to someone who has not been in it. Everyone around you is free from the burden, and yet their voices are the loudest in the room. They feel entitled to an opinion about a sacrifice they will never have to make. That is not fair. It is not fair to expect a level of sacrifice from him that no one else in the room was being asked to consider, and then judge him for hesitating. I also want to name something that I think gets lost in conversations like this. He did not say no forever. He said he was not sure yet. He said he might go back on his decision. He said he needed time. The family's response to that uncertainty was to go ballistic and call him names. What exactly did they think that reaction was going to accomplish? If you want someone to make a generous and deeply personal sacrifice for you, treating them like a villain for needing time to think about it is possibly the worst strategy imaginable. And beyond strategy, it is simply not a decent way to treat someone you love. Now here is where I land on this, and I am not going to be gentle about it. Your body belongs to you. Full stop. No relationship, no matter how meaningful, and no gift, no matter how generous, creates an obligation to donate your organs. The moment someone treats a kidney as a debt repayment, they have fundamentally misunderstood what both generosity and love are supposed to mean. Your stepdad did not pay for your college expecting a kidney in return. He did it because he wanted to be your family. Converting that into a transaction after the fact is not something the family gets to do unilaterally. The way this was handled by your mom and the extended family was genuinely wrong. Ignoring the request for a few days of privacy, pre-celebrating before any decision was made, calling you names when you said no, framing past generosity as a debt you now owe, all of that was wrong. It put you in an impossible position and it made a deeply personal medical decision feel like a public referendum on whether you are a good person. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to need time. You are allowed to weigh the risks to your own body without being treated like a criminal for it. And if you do eventually decide to donate, I hope it is because you truly chose it. Not because the pressure became unbearable. Not because you were guilted into it. Not because the alternative felt worse than surgery. The only version of this decision that is worth anything is one that comes from a place that is genuinely yours. Whatever you decide, you are not the one who behaved badly here. The people who turned a man's medical crisis into a pressure campaign against you are the ones who should be examining their own actions. Your stepdad already knows that. It is a shame the rest of them do not. Drop a comment telling me which story hit harder today. I honestly cannot decide. And if this content is your kind of thing, a like and subscribe would mean the world.